Okay, so we are now recording. Welcome to our webinar on stress management and the reduction, how it can lead to, of course, increased clarity. I'll talk about why that matters to me and my own personal experience and journey. I'm only about a few minutes of this webinar today, which is good for you because you're really here to learn from Aaron. Aaron, I'll let you introduce yourself just a little bit, and then I'll turn it back over to you for the fuller time. But if you just want to explain who you are, and we'll let me change the views here so we're more side by side. Good.
Sure. Thank you, James. So my name is Aaron Johnson, and I founded a company called Glisten about 7 years ago, where the focus is teaching professionals in private practice mindfulness and meditation techniques. And I learned this in New York when I was working for The Economist. I spent 11 years in New York City after graduating from Penn, working in marketing and business intelligence roles for Forbes magazine, The Economist, and then also for an investment bank first. So was working 80 hours a week, traveling to London all the time for The Economist, and really just kind of reaching this point where I was very stressed out. It was impacting my body and just really needed to find a solution to look more deeply into what it was I really wanted and just how to manage my stress levels. And I ended up finding an 8-week meditation course, one-on-one in New York City. And slowly but surely, it started to change the way I approached my mind and my body. And as I continued to practice, it truly led me to question what I wanted to do and make a change. So I moved out to San Diego. The Economist sponsored me moving out here, which gave me a really nice runway from which to figure out how to found a business and what kind of offering I wanted to create. So the culmination of that practice and just that program really allowed me to figure out that I really wanted to help get this in front of more people, and particularly corporate types that really needed to find an organic solution to help them move through stress with more ease, and also to figure out clarity, what you really want to do, what's important to you, how do you lead, how do you run a business, or what do you really want to do. So that's the focus of my work through Glisten.
I love it.
7 years.
That's great. And I have a slide at the end that actually shows, I know they can see you on the video, but I have a slide at the end that has your picture and another introduction slide. So you can elaborate anything else that comes to mind there and then start your session then. But I'm James Martin. I'm the growthexecutive.com. I'm the guy wearing the hat trying to hide my face, but the better looking people around that's my family, father of 3 here in San Diego. I'll give you a short version, Aaron, since you did on my story. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I just start things. There's a longer version on my website if you want to go, see a little video about my background. But I have started nonprofits. I've even started a couple of churches with a team. But I'm mainly working with software, typically software as a service companies. I find that those have a opportunity to build an X, usually on a multiple of revenues. So I've always been a systems guy, kind of more of the integrator behind the visionary. So what that means is most companies are led by a strong CEO who gets the vision, but sometimes I really struggle to break that down and to execute on a day-to-day kind of tactical means, or to kind of figure out the strategy of how to do that. More guys like me come along as more the chief operating officer or the general manager, or we have different roles, different companies, but I filled the CFO role, I filled the CRO role, more of a CMO, and then ultimately chief operating officer or president of companies. But as the growth executive, what I have found is really the powers in coaching. And I call it purpose-driven execution. So like, how do we get everybody on the team in alignment? How do we make sure that we're all moving in the same direction for both personal development, professional leadership development, and of course, ultimately pipeline development. But Aaron, one of the reasons I call myself the growth executive is that I focus mainly on revenue and systems that drive revenue and profits. You don't really want to hire necessarily a coach who's just going to come in and give you good leadership practice. There's a lot of guys and gals out there that do that, and I've had a number of those coaches, and still to this day have a leadership development coach. But I tend to come in very strategically and say, look, let's find out what we can do to drive real revenue. What marketing systems, sales systems, and processes do we need to implement that drives revenue, which is why we're talking about this topic today, Aaron. As a serial entrepreneur, I'm happy to say I've earned most of this gray hair, so for sure. But I have been in companies that have grown very, very fast, and without real, that weren't really properly capitalized initially. So a lot of times we grow fast as a tech company because we're good at what we do, but then we kind of hit the ceiling and it gets really stressful. So we're kind of at that crossroads often in these early startups where it's like, what is my identity? Who's my market? What's my product? How do I take that to market? And what do I need to do to really double down on that? And that can create a tremendous amount of stress. So early in my career, sounds like you, Aaron, I really found that if I just started the mornings with and I'm an analytical guy and a science guy, so I wasn't like all into meditation and stuff initially, which I know you're going to go into the science of it and kind of help us understand that. I was resistant to it at first. I also have a Christian Judeo background, so there was kind of some of my own belief systems that were kind of getting in the way of some of that. I just didn't really understand it. But I went off on a retreat, and part of being in this leadership retreat, they took us through an exercise, and it was just mind blowing on how much clarity we had. And I'm just walking through. So I have started my practice now every day, just meditating, getting a lot of clarity, and it just has been phenomenal to really help me and so focus and center myself. And even in my coaching, if I'm leading a sales offsite strategy session for the quarter, for example, I'll lead the team in a similar exercise to just make sure we're grounded in the moment and present. It's very hard to do that sometimes as leaders. And I'll just end with this: my top coaching goals typically. This is when I surveyed my clients. They say, "Hey, what would you like? What are your goals out of coaching? How do I help you hit those?" I highlighted the ones in yellow that had to do more with centering and focus and the power of clarity. And that's issue processing so many times. And the reason you want to coach is you're so close to the problem. Sometimes it's hard to see the solution. And so as a coach, I'm really like to draw that out of people. They already know a lot of times what they need to do. They just need encouragement and accountability to do it. But I find that just centering them and helping them through some of the practices that we're going to talk about today has been instrumental in helping that happen. Of course, stress management, especially this time of year, there's a lot of stress. I work a lot with in the B2C, business to consumer, even the B2B, business to business, but market. So, I just came out of a season with a client, $40 million on one day. It was a big day for them. So that's a lot. That's a lot of revenue, a lot riding on their systems and everything working. And the amount of stress that goes into that is incredible. So personal and professional development and role clarity. Those are the top coaching goals. So this is where I'm going to quit talking, Aaron. As I mentioned on the onset, I'm the son of a preacher, so I tend to run my mouth too much probably and then take an offering. So I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of reintroduce yourself if you want to, but certainly take it from here and own the stage.
Great. Thank you, James. I too shared that view that James expressed, just some resistance around meditation and mindfulness when I was in New York, just kind of thinking it was out there and woo-woo. I'd done a lot of yoga and I really enjoyed Savasana at the end of the practice, but was very resistant to meditation itself just because I didn't know what it was. And the biggest piece of the resistance was really thinking that I had to silence my mind and not have any thoughts. And that's the thing I really want to hone in on in this session, is that meditation is not about not having thoughts and having a clear mind immediately. It's really about beginning to have some space, like James said, between seeing a thought, feeling an emotion, feeling a physical sensation, and how you choose to respond to it. And the beauty of the exercise I'm going to take you through today is that it really gently and effortlessly begins to allow you to reframe your approach to your mind and your body. So what I want to start with today is just talking a little bit about the stress response and the science behind the stress response and how that tends to become an issue over time, which makes it harder for us to tap into that clarity and receive that emotional intelligence that we all want, especially as business leaders. And then how mindfulness and meditation specifically become an antidote to that stress response. It becomes sort of an organic medicine, if you will, to help to stop that autopilot and begin to create a new autopilot. So what I'm going to do is take you through a little bit of the stress response, the science behind that. Then we're going to go through a very simple breathing exercise that's going to allow you to experience a balanced autonomic nervous system, which is the key to why meditation is efficacious. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what meditation is, what it isn't. Then we're going to go through some of the science and the research to substantiate the efficacy of meditation around reducing stress and enhancing clarity. Then we're going to close with a very short mindfulness-based meditation that I'm going to take you through. And then I'm also going to send you an audio recording of this meditation so you can begin to establish a daily practice at home. So let's start with the science behind stress. So we all know that stress is a natural thing. It's part of the human condition. It's certainly part of the corporate space, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're working for a company. and it's natural to experience stress. What happens though is if we have chronic stress and we're not able to calm down from that state of stress, that it becomes damaging to our minds and our bodies. So when we're in a state of stress, the hypothalamus is triggered and it releases cortisol and adrenaline to help us have, our muscles strengthen and our heart rate increases so we can respond to that stress. And then when the stress calms down, the hypothalamus should tell all of our systems to come back to a balanced autonomic nervous system. Because when we're in stress, we trigger a sympathetic response, which is that fight or flight. And again, sometimes that's natural, but when it's chronic, over time, the science actually shows that adrenaline and cortisol constantly pumping through our system actually begins to affect the structure of the brain. There are three parts of the brain that tend to be affected. The first is the hippocampus, which is responsible for emotional intelligence, memories, and it also regulates the production of cortisol. So it helps that autonomic nervous system find balance and regulation of cortisol to bring it down. But when we're in a constant state of chronic stress, the hippocampus actually grows over time. So the gray matter in the hippocampus increases. And so the regulation of cortisol becomes lessened. It isn't able to do its job as it normally does. And over time, science shows that the gray matter actually decreases. I'm sorry, I think I said it increases. It decreases over time, which makes it less able to regulate cortisol. The other part of the brain, which is very important for clarity and emotional intelligence, is the prefrontal cortex. And that's the part that's responsible for decision making. And over time, what happens when we're in a state of chronic stress is that blood flow goes away from that part of the brain, and that also begins to shrink. So its strength begins to diminish over time with the chronic stress response. The other part of the brain that's affected is something called the amygdala, and that really fires when we're in a state of chronic fight or flight stress response. And over time, the science shows that because the blood flow increases to the amygdala, over time, it actually gets bigger in size. So they're able to measure the size of it, and it gets bigger. So there's an autopilot that's taking blood flow to the amygdala, strengthening it, which actually over time can really impact our ability to regulate cortisol and can lead to chronic anxiety and depression, which becomes a problem. It becomes very difficult to get out of that autopilot. So what meditation and mindfulness do is they actually begin to rewire some of that blood flow and shift the response and help us deal with stress much more easily. And before I go into what mindfulness and meditation are and take you through a small chart that I have, I'd like everybody to gently close their eyes and get into a really relaxed state. So we can go through a very simple breathing exercise that's going to allow you to experience a balanced autonomic nervous system where the sympathetic response comes down, the parasympathetic response is triggered, and we find a feeling of balance. So gently close your eyes and get really comfortable. And just for the next 2 minutes, do your best to let go of the first part of the day and let go of the external world and begin to shift your attention inward. Just connect with the easy, gentle rhythm of your breath. And we're going to move through a breathing exercise that's been designed to trigger a parasympathetic response. So let's begin. I'd like you to take a deep breath in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Suspend your breath for 4, 3, 2, 1, and open mouth. Exhale, letting go. 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, take a deep breath in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Suspend your breath for 4, 3, 2, 1, and open mouth. Exhale, letting go. 4, 3, 2, 1. Last time, take a deep breath in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Suspend your breath for 4, 3, 2, 1, and open mouth, exhale, letting go. 4, 3, 2, 1. Keeping your eyes closed. Let your breath easily and gently find its own natural rhythm. And just for about 30 seconds, stay very connected to your breath as you simply observe the gentle rise and fall of your belly with each inhalation and exhalation. And take a moment to observe and notice any shift in the way you feel after moving through that breathing exercise. Notice if you feel a little lighter, a little calmer. Notice if there's no change, just observe. And you can now gently begin to deepen your breath. Wiggle your fingers and toes. Slowly bring your awareness back into your body fully. Back to the present moment. And whenever you're ready, gently open your eyes and come back to awareness of where you are. Simply notice how you feel. Now I'm going to jump into some simple definitions around meditation and mindfulness and just dispel any myths around it. So meditation itself is simply a state of rest. It's a resting state where the autonomic nervous system is more balanced. We trigger a parasympathetic response to bring down the sympathetic, and it's a state of rest that we reach. The key, though, is that our awareness is heightened. Our awareness of our thoughts is heightened, of our emotions, and of our physical body. And it's that state of rest that we desire to find in meditation, where we let go of attachment or judgment to the process. And that's the key. The key with meditation to achieve that state is to establish a one-pointed focus. So we give the mind one thing to focus on. And as the mind focuses on that one thing, it gently and effortlessly begins to loosen its need to be in the future or the past or be holding on to thoughts in the present. It allows the mind and the body to start to relax and let go. And what is mindfulness, and what is the connection between mindfulness and meditation? Mindfulness is simply a form of meditation. And the definition of mindfulness specifically is awareness. It's awareness in the present moment of one's thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations. But the key is that it's without judgment or attachment. So as I said, meditation, we achieve that resting state with one-pointed attention. Mindfulness becomes that one-pointed attention because we're so intently observing and having awareness of our thoughts, our emotions, and our physical sensations, that in that awareness, that one-pointed awareness, the mind effortlessly begins to let go of being in the future, the past, or holding. And that James said that earlier, like you want to have a distance between a thought, an experience, or even being with a problem so that you can look at it from an expanded perspective. And that's what starts to happen. In that single pointed focus, a pause is created. And what I want to share now is a chart that my first meditation teacher took me through in New York that really resonated with me and helped me understand that this practice, this whole endeavor, was not about not having thoughts. It was simply about learning how to reframe your approach to your thoughts so that there is a bit of a distance and so that you can begin to tap into that state of rest. And then everything begins to change from there. So this top part here, the blue line, is that state of rest, that balanced autonomic nervous system where the sympathetic response comes up. We're lessening that, and the way the parasympathetic response comes up, we're lessening the sympathetic response. We have a state of rest. The top part here is an untrained mind or someone moving through the human condition without having a practice of meditation. You're attached to the high thoughts, you're attached to the low thoughts, the positive and negative experiences. and you tend to hold on to them, right? Hold on to ruminate on that negative thought or want to hold on to a positive experience. You're holding. There's no space between the thought, the emotion, and how you choose to respond to it. So there's a lot of energy here. This part here shows that there's a lot of energy that's lost because there is this inherent mechanism within us that desires, it's an autonomic mechanism that wants to be in that state of rest, wants to be in that balanced state. And we are sort of fighting with ourselves when we're holding on to thoughts and experiences and not having that pause. So there's a lot of energy lost because we're fighting with this inherent mechanism when we're in that sympathetic fight or flight constantly, or holding on to our thoughts and emotions. So that's why we're often tired a lot. We have a hard time waking up. We have a hard time falling asleep because our energy is affected and we're fighting with ourselves. This bottom line here represents a trained mind, someone who has a meditation practice and is working on finding that state of rest daily. It becomes much easier for us to move through the experience of the human condition and be in a workplace, dealing with stress, dealing with positive and negative experiences. But instead of being so far away and holding on to those experiences and thoughts, we're hovering much more closely to the blue line because we have a seated practice. We're training our mind to go to that place of rest consistently daily. So when we're faced with something negative or positive and we have that tendency toward holding, it becomes effortless for the mind to loosen its hold. And so we hover much more closely to that state of balance that we're tapping into in meditation. And these experiences, these thoughts, these ups and downs become like rolling hills versus peaks and valleys. And all this energy, that's drained here is freed up. So we have energy to move throughout the day. We're able to fall asleep at night and it will become much more efficient. And this is the state too, where the clarity becomes increased. And so now I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the science and the data behind how meditation becomes efficacious and what the scientists have actually seen over time. It's really compelling in that this particular person, Sarah Lazar, out of Harvard Medical School, she did a lot of research looking at brain scans, doing brain scans of people who had gone through an 8-week meditation course versus a control group. And it was significant in that they found that the gray matter actually increased in several parts of the brain that are key for enhanced clarity and finding that state of balance. There was increased gray matter in the posterior cingulate, which is the part that is triggered when we're looking at self-awareness and processing information. The hippocampus, which I talked about earlier, the gray matter there actually is increased. When you're in a stress response, it decreases. I apologize for that little flip, but when we're in a state of stress, the gray matter in the hippocampus decreases. We notice over meditation, over just 8 weeks, that the gray matter increases. And again, that part of the brain is responsible for that regulation of cortisol, also for emotional intelligence and memory forming. So as the gray matter increases, its capacity, its strength increases. Another area of the brain that was noticed an increase in gray matter was the temporoparietal junction, which is associated with empathy, perspective taking, and compassion. That was increased. An area called the pons was also increased, where there are a lot of neurotransmitters with serotonin. That was increased. And a key part that was affected was that prefrontal cortex, which I talked about earlier, that part of the brain, the front of the brain, which is responsible for executive decision-making, clarity, and becoming more efficient. So that over time, after just 8 weeks, they noticed an increase in gray matter in that part of the brain. And the really exciting piece of that study that came out is that the amygdala that I talked about earlier, that becomes bigger when we're in a state of stress, becomes strengthened. After just 8 weeks, they noticed that the amygdala actually shrank significantly in size, which helps to automatically start to reduce the stress response, and the blood flow begins to go away from the amygdala toward the prefrontal cortex. And over time, the structure and the size, it decreases, which is significant. So we're actually looking at structural shifts that happen after just 8 weeks of a seated daily meditation practice. I also want to bring in a study that was done by a man named Philippe Golden out of UC Davis. He published this information when he was working on his dissertation at Stanford. And instead of looking at the scans to look at the structure of the brain, he actually looked at using fMRI technology to measure the activity in the brain, so the blood flow. And this really helps you understand what I'm after here with meditation, and that we're not wanting to not have any thoughts. We're truly wanting to reframe the way we approach our thoughts. And his study was really compelling in that they had people who had gone through an 8-week meditation course look at negative self-statements. So they exposed them to negative self-statements, and they measured fMRI to look at the activity. And even though people were focused on negative self-statements or negative thoughts, if you will, the blood flow to that posterior cingulate, which is responsible for processing information, that actually increased. The blood flow increased to that part of the brain. The other really exciting part of it is that they noticed that as they consistently looked at the negative self-talk, the blood flow shifted away from the amygdala. Even though it was negative, the people who had gone through the 8-week meditation program were able to see the thought, process it, have space between the negative thought, and lessen their reaction to it. They did not go into a state of anxiety or chronic stress or worry. The amygdala, the activation of the amygdala was actually decreased. So it shows that even though we do continue to have negative experiences, we're moving through the human condition, we're going to have negative thoughts. We don't want to shy away from them. With this practice, it teaches us to begin to reframe our approach to them. So we have a bit of distance. We can process it, but we're not responding the same way. And he noticed that participants in the 8-week meditation program said that they had less stress and worry overall. So it helps us begin to interrupt that autopilot and literally begins to shift the blood flow. And the key to it truly is that autonomic nervous system is triggering the parasympathetic response and the autonomic nervous system to bring it into balance, into that blue line, so that the body can do what it naturally wants to do, and we can kind of begin to get out of our own way. And how does this translate to increased clarity and intuition? There's another part of the brain that scientists have demonstrated that is really key for intuition, and that's in the very center of the prefrontal cortex. There's a ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and that's the part that really tends to be triggered when we're accessing our intuition. And a study out of Wake Forest showed that participants who had gone through an 8-week meditation program noticed, again, through an fMRI measurement activity, that there was significantly increased activity in that particular part of the prefrontal cortex, which correlates to enhanced accessing your intuition and enhanced intuition. And there was a study where they asked, I think, 36 CEOs what was key for their decision-making process, and 85% of them said that gut feel or intuition was the most important part of their decision-making process. So as we bring in these tools, very simple tools daily, we're triggering that blood flow to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex daily. We're enhancing that ability. It allows us to begin to shift the structure of our brain and the activity so much so that it becomes automatic. And that's what I'm really wanting to articulate here. It's something that starts to snowball, if you will. You start to have a daily practice, you tap into that place inside, that state of rest. And then as you do it with consistency, that space that James talked about and I talked about earlier between the thought, between the emotion, and your response to it increases so significantly that you are able to sort of get underneath that. The conscious mind, that monkey mind that constantly is bombarding you with positive and negative thoughts and all that stuff, you see it, but you see it from a bit of a distance. So you're able to loosen your hold on it. And in loosening that hold, there's an opening, there's space within where you can begin to much more easily tap in to that deeper part of the mind, that deeper part of you, that gut part of you that already knows, like James said earlier. Oftentimes we always have the solution. It's just sort of buried under the layers of the mind and the noise that we have. And the beauty of these practices is that it begins to gently quiet that noise. So we get a little bit underneath it and we can much more easily tap into our intuition and receive enhanced clarity. And when we begin to listen, it's been my experience, and I named my company Listen because I'm basically guiding people to listen. As you listen, closely to that voice, my experience is that it will never steer you in the wrong direction. You just need to get quiet enough to begin to touch it and to ascertain it. And it's really exciting that the science substantiates the experiential proof that we have. You experience that and as you sit with the practice, and the science actually substantiates why it's efficacious and what actually happens over time. And like James said earlier, he had resistance, I had resistance. And for me, the science and the data and the understanding of the fact that there is an actual shift in the structure of the brain, there is an actual shift in the activity and the blood flow in the brain, that makes it much more grounded, much more approachable, and says, okay, I want to give this a go. I want to open my mind to this because it has been measured, it has been studied, and I'm not making an investment of my time that's not going to have a return. And I think that's key. I think that's why I like to bring the science and the data in, especially to corporate types and to entrepreneurs and executives, to help open their minds to something that is so simple and so effortless that it can truly begin to create a significant change in your life and help you become much more connected to that deeper part of yourself and become a better leader. And the beauty of it is that it's completely organic. It's not a medicine. It's something that you can do on your own every day. There are no side effects to it. But just to dispel some myths, there's no chanting. It doesn't interfere with any religious beliefs. It's a simple tool you can bring in, and you can do it for just 5 minutes a day, and it's going to have an impact. The key, really, truly, it's just about the breath. Using the breath to establish a single point of focus, to trigger a parasympathetic nervous system response, to achieve that balance between the two parts of the autonomic nervous system. And then everything begins to shift from that place. And that's what the science shows. So with that, I want to be conscious of time. And I'd like to now take you through a short guided mindfulness-based meditation so that you truly can have an experience of touching that state of rest while using observation as that tool of single pointed focus. So with that, I'd like you to gently close your eyes again and get really comfortable. And if you have access to lying down, it's completely fine to lie down or sit upright in a seated position with your feet on the floor, whatever feels right for you. And again, begin to let go of everything we just talked about, let go of the external world for the next 10 minutes or so, and begin to turn your attention inward. And before we start, I'd like you to take a step back, your eyes closed, and place yourself in the role of observer. You're sort of stepping outside of yourself, looking back in. Simply become aware of the wave of thoughts in your mind. Just notice them as they come and go. Feel into any emotions that come up for you as we move through this. And also notice any physical sensations. And simply observe with no judgment or attachment. And with your eyes closed, I'd like you to simply bring your attention to your lungs. Feel into the space of your lungs as you breathe naturally. And notice any sensations that arise for you. And now I'd like you to take a deep breath in, filling your lungs completely with air and allowing your belly to stick way out and fully expand. And exhale. And now simply observe any shift or change in the space of your lungs after taking that deep breath. Maybe you feel a little bit lighter, maybe you let go of something, maybe there's no change. Just observe and notice. And now gently move your attention down to your abdominal muscles. Feel into the space here. Notice any sensations that arise. And now let's take a deep breath in and exhale. Take a moment now to observe any shift or change that may have come into the space of your abdominal muscles as a result of that deep breath. Just notice and observe. Gently bring your attention down to your feet and your toes and your legs. Do a quick scan here, noticing any sensations that arise. And now take a deep breath in, bringing air fully into your lungs, letting your belly stick way out. And exhale. Take a moment to observe any impact that deep breath may have had on your observation of your feet and your toes and your legs. Gently bring your attention up to your hands and your fingers and your arms and do a quick scan, noticing any sensations that arise. And now take another deep breath in. And exhale. Letting go. Notice now any shift or change that may have come into the space of your hands and fingers and arms as a result of that deep breath. Just notice. Just observe. Now bring your attention up to your neck and shoulders. Feel into the space here, noticing any sensations that arise in the present moment. We do tend to hold tension and stress in our neck and shoulders, so notice if that might be true for you. And now let's take a deep breath in, bringing air fully into your lungs, letting your belly fully expand. And exhale. Take a moment to observe any shift or change that may have come into the space of your neck and shoulders as a result of that deep breath. Just notice and observe. Notice if you were able to release some tension. Notice if you feel a little bit light. Let go of any judgment and simply observe what is in this moment. Now gently bring your attention to your heart. Feel into the space of your heart. And in the stillness and the quiet, you may even be able to perceive your heartbeat. Just notice and observe as you breathe naturally. And now let's take another deep breath in, bringing air fully into your lungs and belly. And exhale. Observe any shift or change that may have come into the space of your heart as a result of that deep breath. Simply notice and observe. And now bring your attention up to your mind. As the observer, simply notice any thoughts that may be present in this moment. Watch them come and go, almost like waves. Let whatever is there be there and notice. And now let's take a deep breath in and exhale. Take a moment now to observe and shift or change in the way. Observe your thoughts. as a result of that deep breath. Just notice. Just observe. And now with your eyes closed, I'd like you to bring your attention back to your lungs. Feel into the space of your lungs as you breathe naturally, noticing any sensations that come up in this present moment. And as you breathe naturally, I'd like you to silently say to yourself, my lungs are completely relaxed. Gently now bring your attention down to your abdominal muscles. Feel into the space here. Notice any sensations that arise. We do tend to hold emotion here, so notice anything that comes up for you. As you breathe naturally, silently say to yourself here, my abdominal muscles are completely relaxed. Gently now bring your attention down to your feet and your toes and your legs. Just doing another quick scan here in the present moment. Notice any sensations that arise. And say to yourself silently, my feet and toes and legs are completely relaxed. Gently now bring attention up to your hands, your fingers, and your arms, feeling into the space as you breathe naturally. And silently say to yourself, my hands and arms are completely relaxed. Gently now bring attention up to your neck and your shoulders. Doing a quick scan here. Sensations that arise in this moment. And silently say to yourself, my neck and shoulders are completely relaxed. And now bring your attention to your heart. Feel into the space of your heart in this moment. Notice and observe any sensations that arise for you. And now silently say to yourself, my heart is completely relaxed. And gently bring your attention up to your mind. Notice and observe any thoughts that may be present in this moment. Knowing it's completely natural for thoughts to be there. Simply notice and observe them as you breathe naturally. And silently say to yourself here, my mind is completely relaxed. And as you breathe naturally, saying, my whole being is completely relaxed. Keep your eyes closed. Bring your attention to your breath. Really feel your breath. And follow it. As you breathe deeply in and out. And continue like this just for the next moment. And notice anytime your mind wanders and thoughts come in, just completely natural. Gently bring your attention back to your breath, back to your observation of your breath. And allow yourself to let go for the next minute and rest. And slowly now begin to deepen your breath. Begin to wiggle your fingers and toes. Slowly bring your awareness back into your body fully, back to the present moment. Whenever you're ready, gently open your eyes and come back to awareness of where you are. You're fine. And come back. And I know we're wrapping up, right, James, right now?
Yeah, I have just one clarifying question for you, just because I thought that was brilliant and beautiful. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Um, and then I have three specific examples that I want to give everyone holds, because I think you coach as well, Aaron, but I think as coaches we're always looking for giving people ways that this kind of shows up in their roles or their day. But one thing, the question for you, Aaron, before I give the examples that came to mind in doing the presentation, which by the way, I think it's kind of the point, right? Is you create a lot of clarity. So I was thinking about the clarity of this session and our webinar today, and how this applies to my the work that I do as a purpose-driven coach. But so it worked. Thank you. Got that clarity. But you said this kind of stacks. This is this kind of, is it like it's a daily routine? Is it like, how do you suggest that somebody gets started when they're, I know there's a lot of apps out there. You meet with clients. Like, where does one start, and what's the benefit to one approach, app versus a coach or what have you versus another? Does that question make sense?
It does. It's a great question. And what I say is the best way to do it is first thing in the morning. And it can be just 5 minutes, just sitting quietly and beginning to use the breath or use a guided exercise. You can use an app, you can use a recording. I'm going to send you a recording of that meditation that's been professionally done. It even could be as simple as just focusing on your breath. Whatever you feel you connect with, just finding some mechanism, some tool that resonates with you, and do it first thing in the morning before you start your day. So I'm sure you can relate to this, James. Once you start your day, you start checking email, you're already in that sort of faster brainwave state. And I could go even more into the science. I get so excited about it, but the science shows that during meditation, you access much slower frequencies of brainwaves, alpha and theta. And when you're sleeping, you're in delta, which is really slow. When we're in our awakened state, which is beta, we're fast. And that's what we're in, right now, or when you're checking email. So the key is to do it in the morning. You're coming out of the delta sleep state. You're much more relaxed. So it's much easier for you to drop into it also, because you're already calm. So I just recommend first thing in the morning before you start your day, right after you brush your teeth, either simply focusing on the breath or recording. An app is great, or you could also, work with somebody to help you establish consistency, because the key with meditation, the benefits, the efficacy comes from consistency. Sort of, I equate it to medicine. The root word of meditation is the same as medicine, Maderi, in Latin, it means to heal. The key is you want to take this medicine every day, even if it's just for 5 minutes, accessing that blue line that I showed you earlier. Every day in a seated practice, over time, you're going to start to notice a shift, an experiential shift in the way that you feel. But the key is consistency. So that's why I say first thing in the morning as a beginner.
Okay. And then and Brian asked a question. Brian, I'll get like my follow-up question on that is like, I often tell, every performance athlete, high performing CEO, that we all have coaches. Like when I wanted to improve my swim time, I got a coach. Like I've always defaulted to coaches, and I'm probably obviously a bit biased because I am a coach. So I'm in the middle of really growing my story, what's called story brands. I want to find a story brand coach because I feel like I can get there further, faster, cheaper ultimately by having a guy. Is that like, do you work with exactly them get there faster? Like when would someone call you, and what kind of benefit would they get working with a guided coach like you to get this done? Does that question resonate?
It does. And I also, in my experience, my journey, I told you I worked with a meditation teacher in New York, one-on-one for 8 weeks. Right after that, the clarity that came from that was that I really needed to go deeper with what I wanted to do with my life. So I hired a coach, a holistic business coach, to help me delve more deeply into what I wanted to do using some of these tools and techniques, and held the space.
Okay.
As you're saying, every week, once a week, we had a session. I did the practice on my own, and then we come back together to talk about what I was experiencing. So I think that's hugely beneficial. And the reason why is because if you're like me and James, probably you're, an executive, you're an entrepreneur, your mind's really active. That's my experience anyway. It's very active, it's very powerful, and it's a gift. And we don't want to run away from that. We want to learn how to shift our approach to it so that we use it for our advantage and to our benefit, rather than allowing it to kind of go against us. And my experience, just like James, is that it's much easier to do that if you have structure, if you have support, if you have somebody holding you accountable, and also somebody to listen to your experiences of the practice or what you're doing, instead of just doing it in a vacuum on your own. Because as you move through this process and you sit with yourself and you reframe your approach to your mind and your body, you receive that clarity. A lot comes up, and it's helpful to have somebody to bounce ideas off of and to explain what's coming up so that they can guide you and help you to take the next step. And it's been hugely beneficial in my journey. I worked with her for almost 2 years, and she was instrumental in my moving out here and figuring out what it is I really wanted to do.
That's a great question. That's an outstanding response. And Brian, I'll ask you a question, but as you talk about working with someone that can help you get there, and even kind of one of Brian's questions is, do we care about the different types of meditation? He lists out several there, mantra, spiritual, focused, walking, transcendental, visualization. So we'll answer, do we care about the types of meditations in a second, Erin, if you could be thinking of it.
Sure.
For my own experience, when I first was introduced to it, I was in a conflict with a business partner that was going sideways. We had brought in, of course, the attorneys, and we're mediation and what have you. And we had lots of, these are very, very stressful times, especially as a business owner. A lot of times your net worth is really wrapped up in your company or your business, right?
Absolutely.
Like this is like, not like, oh, I might lose a couple $1 million. Like this is your life. This is everything, right? So so we had the recommendation to go out and find, we called her the executive whisperer, but she was kind of a guided coach that kind of helped us, pre-mediation kind of conversation. But one of the things that she taught me that was extremely powerful, which I heard you say today, was the power of stopping, looking, and choosing. And Erin, if I could pick one superhero to have, besides like instant Google in my head, or I could like learn karate but if I could have one superhero trait, it would be to stop, to look, and to choose. Space between the stimulus and then your response to it. Like my marriage would be better, my business would be better, I'd be all around if I could stop in the moment, freeze frame, think for a minute, connect with where I'm at, find my positioning, and then choose. And the reason that helped in the business challenges is that when we would walk into these meetings, man, we would just blow up at each other and it would go crazy and it would be highly unproductive. And it wasn't great. It wasn't until we realized, hey, this isn't going to give me the outcome I truly want. And if in the middle of a negotiation or in a conversation or mediation and just get centered, man, it's so much more powerful. And then the last example I'll give you is just when I'm leading a strategy team, coaching a sales, I listen to a lot of sales calls with clients and listening to their quality they do. But I found that if I can stop the room and center the room in the moment, or as a sales guy, stop and center in the moment, my positivity and start thinking positivity, connection, you mentioned judgment, but dropping judgment. My strategy session, I'm thinking I have a different side of the brain. I'm thinking more creative and not so, fear-based, scarcity. I'm thinking openness and possibility and gratitude, as opposed to thinking scarcity, failure, what's not working. So it shows up in strategy meetings with just taking the digital, phones and keeping them off the tables, and everybody's not checking email. We're present. Just a simple little exercise of coming back. It doesn't take much, right? Just a few minutes, but centering us in the room with one another allows our strategy set so much better. And then as a sales guy, if I sit down instead of pacing the room and I center myself just for a minute before I pick up the phone and make that sales call, I'm more connected to myself, and therefore I'm more connected to the other party, and I'm listening, and I have a lot of clarity, and I'm asking, I can ask a lot better questions. It's just a better call altogether. So those are just some practical things. But what's your answer to Brian? Like, think about like the business application, everything I just said. Like, is there a particular type of meditation that makes the most sense for us as entrepreneurs and as executives?
I think that's a great question. And my experience is that it's very personal. And that's why I've actually designed the program that I offer to be delivered over 8 weeks to expose people to different forms of meditation. Expose people to mindfulness. I expose people to mantra-based meditation, to visualization-based meditation. And we work together to really look deeply into what resonates most strongly with your mind. And my experience after doing this for almost 7 years with a myriad of clients is that everybody is different. There's no one size, fits all. It's really about you experiencing it and experimenting with different types to learn what helps you access that state of rest. And that's what I say, that what James said before, becoming less reactive, having that space, being able to be present, to be centered, to be able to listen, all comes down to balancing the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah. Okay.
My point in my program and what I do with clients is I help them let go of any judgment and look more deeply into what tools, what forms of meditation are going to resonate most strongly to help them access that state of rest. Because at the end of the day, if somebody's telling you a mantra is the best thing, but that's not resonating with you and you're not accessing that state of rest, it's for naught. It's about your individual makeup and how you're best going to access that state of rest, bottom line. So that's the way I design my program, is I brought in a lot of the tools and techniques I was exposed to over my experience working with my coaches, and then I deliver it to people. By the end of the 8 weeks, we hone in on which form is best for them, and they walk away with a practice that allows them unequivocally to access that state of rest with ease. And it becomes something that you start to look forward to. That's been my experience, and that's what my intention is with everybody I work with.
It sounds like that's why we work with a coach that can help us facilitate that, or come to that clarity, or join or get some instruction, because it's different for every individual, kind of the way we're wired, or maybe even the circumstances that we're in. I know when I was in that partner conflict, I needed a different type of grounding and a different sense of practice than maybe I do now, as I'm managing my energy this afternoon for my next series of calls I need to make. Right? So I maybe do more of a walking meditation now, whereas if I'm vision planning or sitting down and kind of planning the year as a leader, I might do more of a visualization. So it can be different to the personality, but is it also different to the type of things coming at you, do you think?
It's a great point. And it is, absolutely. If it's really that you're just after stress reduction and finding, balance, mindfulness might resonate more strongly with you. If you're looking to really solve a problem or to focus on, manifesting, that's another piece of what I help people do, is manifesting what they truly desire, bringing it into the physical world. Visualization can be really powerful. So yes, 100%. Absolutely. It's circumstantial as well. And I would also say some people are more visual. Some people are, resonate much more strongly with audio. And that's where a mantra can come in, or, even music can help people access that state of rest. So just really, it's a combination. That's a great point of your makeup, what resonates with you, and also what you're moving through, what you're looking to achieve by bringing a daily practice in that particular moment.
Yeah. And I think that might answer Brian's next question. You talked about learning to meditate, other types of styles. Is there online, personal app-based, that kind of thing? So I'll take a stab at this, and then Aaron, I want to hear you. It seems like what we're saying is that, different modes of learning based on different types of personalities, of course, or different types of people, but also circumstances in life. I know when I was first starting to meditate, I did a lot of, sitting still, but my mind I didn't know what to do. I got an app and I worked through a program. Then I went off to a retreat, and I did a length, like an 8-week retreat. And that was, an experience all by itself. So it really kind of depends on the person and kind of where you're at. I know my wife has a completely different experience with it. So how would you answer Brian's question there on the type of medium or format or style?
I think it's really experimental. I think if you're interested in an app, that's a great way to do it privately. If you just want to kind of dabble with it and not really talk about what you're experiencing potentially, and just kind of practice and see how it feels for you, that's a great, I think, medium to do that. And a retreat is a great way to do it. I've never done a retreat, to be honest, but a lot of people have had tremendous success with that and benefit in terms of removing themselves from their daily life and just tucking themselves away. I think that can be really beneficial for you if you really need to remove yourself from your current circumstances. And if you're really ready to, go there and you're looking to achieve a specific outcome, working with a coach one-on-one, I think is a great thing. But I think if you're just starting to get your feet wet with it, an app is a great way to just kind of meet yourself and not, have anything outside going on at the same time, and just practice it and see how it feels for you.
Well, I'll end with that because we have a couple of marketing folks on the call I recognize today. And so as we wouldn't be much of marketers if we didn't talk about A/B testing, which is what you're talking about. Try one thing, measure so I think be clear on your goals, what you look to accomplish. Have some help, structuring those goals. Lean on someone like Aaron that can coach you and becoming clear on what your outcome needs to be. But then, as long as you're clear on your goals and you're measuring the results, you should be able to try one for a season, another one, for a couple of weeks, and, flip back and forth. But just A/B test. But I think really it's a cumulative effect I have found, and, I won't speak for you, Aaron, but I found just doing it. The knowing comes in the doing. It's like anything in leadership. You just got to do it and figure it out. The first version is not very good. If you can get some coaching, training, and some guides to help you along the way.
James?
You and get that immediate feedback, then start the practice, but you'll understand exactly how you. Any closing thoughts on before we wrap up today?
You it froze on me just for a second there, so I didn't hear everything that you were saying in the last part. But yes, I found it. I just heard at the beginning that to be a cumulative. Can you hear me now? A cumulative effect as well. It's a snowball effect, and I look at it as an investment. You make an investment, you deposit every day, you take your medicine every day. And then it's not going to happen immediately, but in about 2 weeks or so, you start to notice a little bit of a shift. And then after 8 weeks, for sure, you start to notice a significant shift, and the science substantiates that. And the whole thing is, it is about doing it every day. A cumulative effect starts to kick in. And the other thing I would say is that if you're not going to do it and you are just wanting to talk about it or kind of just sit in a practice, but you're not actually accessing that state of rest in integrity and really truly calming your nervous system, you're not going to receive the benefit. And I work with people, and I can always tell by session 4 whether they're doing it and whether it's going to resonate, because you do see significant changes and benefits pretty quickly if you are truly, investing your time in this.
I love it. Well, Aaron, I had a little technical issue there, so thank you for covering for me. But yeah, I was just saying A/B test. Just as marketers, we try different things, you do different modes, and figure out what's working for you. But yeah, getting somebody can guide you in that can certainly help you. So
exactly. And the last thing is there's no judgment. And the whole thing is that you're letting go of any need for perfection.
Oh
right?
yeah.
We're all such
Yeah.
perfectionists and type A's in terms of all the people I work with, myself included. And this is the opposite of that. It's practicing the art of being, letting go of the art of doing, and it's being kind to yourself, letting go of
Yeah.
judgment, being soft and allowing it to unfold,
Yeah.
allowing that snowball effect to start to manifest versus pushing or forcing or needing it to be perfect.
One of the things I tell my clients a lot is the knowing comes in the doing. A lot of times we want to have all the answers and have it all figured out before we do. No, step in, do, try, experience, experiment, get in. And as you iterate, you'll kind of figure these things out. And then of course, in time, you can become more of an expert on it.
The answers tend to come,
sense.
in my experience, the most unexpected times in the most surprising ways, not necessarily in the practice itself, but as you're doing the practice, the answers or the clarity often comes in the shower or when you're walking or when you're out in the world. It's just the practice itself is that investment, and then the structures in the brain start to change, the blood flow starts to change, and then the answers can come whenever they do.
I love it. Well, Erin, thank you so much for your time, and everybody, thank you for being here. Erin's going to send you a gift of a meditation, guided meditation, so that'll be delivered to your inbox. We don't really have much another way again, you'll have her email address, so you can reach out to her directly if you want to learn more about what she does. I'm thegrowthexecutive.com, and your website is also there up on the deal earlier. So if you want to link to that, I can send that to you again, but you'll get an email from her. But do you have any questions or anything for either one of us? Feel free to reach back out. Love your feedback on the session. This is the first time we've done this webinar together, so we plan to do it again next year. I want to perfect it a bit. So if you have any feedback on that, you'll be asked for that here shortly. Any closing thoughts, Erin, before I lose my video again?
Just wanted to thank you so much for hosting, James.
Oh yeah,
much gratitude. It's a great opportunity, and I'm just very excited about getting this in front of more professionals and business types, since I think it's a very easy solution for many people.
I love it. Well, if you're listening to this, you came in, whether you're listening to the recording or came in live, it's because you are interested in learning more about how to reduce stress, which is what our prayers and thoughts and hopes are for you, that you can get, to that clarity in that time. So we want to give you those handholds, those tools to be able to do that. So do feel free to reach out if you have any questions on that. We wish you the best in your journey, and do the best you can in all that you do. All right, guys.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.